Reza Pahlavi has just declared war on Europe for defending the bloodthirsty Islamic Revolutionary Guard in an urgent call for a new Iranian revolution. Now the Iranian crisis has just opened up a serious front in Europe. This is the exiled Iranian prince and the main voice of the opposition against the Ayatollah's regime. He stepped up his criticism of European governments and against part of the continent's press. This Saturday, April 25, 2026, the message coming from the Iranian opposition is direct. Europe cannot keep talking about human rights while treating the Islamic Revolutionary Guard with caution, delay, and political calculation. For Pahlavi, this hesitation does not protect peace. In practice, it protects the mechanism that keeps the Tehran regime alive. I'll tell you all about this in a moment, but now you'll want to subscribe. Subscribe to the channel to stay well informed, real-time information with the best journalistic quality ever seen, with the credibility of Milson Alves News. The statement came after a series of Pahlavi's meetings in European cities, including Stockholm and Berlin, where he met with parliamentarians, governments, and journalists. The stated goal was to carry the voice of millions of Iranians abroad who live under censorship, repression, and fear. But according to him, the silence is not only inside Iran, it is also in the newsrooms, in press conferences, and in political circles of Europe, where diplomacy is often discussed. But they avoid directly addressing the real suffering of the Iranian people. In Berlin, the tension became even more visible when Pahlavi was hit by a red liquid as he left a public event. The German police treated the incident as an action against him and a man was detained. The prince did not suffer serious injuries, but the case became a symbol of the hostile environment faced by the Iranian opposition even outside Iran. For his supporters, the message was clear. Even in the heart of Europe, those who challenge the Ayatollah's regime continue to face intimidation, pressure, and attempts at silencing. At the center of Pahlavi's accusation is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. For the opposition, it is not just a military force. It is the military and economic arm. It is the structure that protects the Ayatollahs, suppresses protesters, monitors society, and supports allies in the Middle East. And it prevents the Iranian population from turning revolt into real change. That's why, when European governments are slow to act against this organization, the opposition sees more than just bureaucracy. They see weakness in the face of a machine of repression. He said that he took part in press conferences with more than 150 journalists, and even so, almost no one asked about the Iranians who were killed, about the political prisoners, or about those sentenced to death. According to him, the reporters showed more interest in discussing the stance of the United States and Israel than in holding the Iranian regime accountable for what it does to its own people. This criticism hit European media coverage like a moral bombshell. The accusation is harsh because it touches on an old contradiction. Europe usually presents itself as a defender of human rights, democracy, and freedom. But in the Iranian case, the opposition sees years of excessive caution. While Iranian families were burying their children, denouncing arrests, and facing political courts, many European governments were still trying to preserve channels with Tehran, holding back stronger measures against the Revolutionary Guard. According to Pahlavi, this stance gave the regime time and left the Iranian people more alone. The United Kingdom also got involved in this dispute. The British government promised to move forward with a law to toughen measures against the Revolutionary Guard and groups linked to hostile states. The promise came amid warnings about threats attributed to Iranian networks on British soil. For the Iranian opposition, this move exposes the central problem. When the threat reaches Europe, the reaction speeds up. When the violence is concentrated inside Iran, the response is usually slow, cautious, and full of diplomatic justifications. Meanwhile, inside Iran, the regime tries to show strength. Authorities repeat that the state is united, that the population is aligned, and that any external pressure will be answered. But recent signs point to a more fragile scenario: the dispute between factions, disagreements over negotiations, and growing economic pressure. It is in this environment that Pahlavi talks about revolution in Iran. The call does not come across as empty rhetoric, but as an attempt to connect external pressure with internal revolt. The idea is simple. If the Revolutionary Guard loses resources, if the regime loses legitimacy, and if the people start to believe that change is possible again, the power structure may begin to crumble from within. For the opposition, Europe needs to stop acting as a crisis manager and start acting as a clear ally of the Iranian people. The accusation against the press is also part of this strategy. Pahlavi wants to move the crisis out of the cold realm of diplomacy and into human terms. He wants journalists to ask about the prisoners, the executed, the disappeared, the mothers who lost their children, and the young people sentenced for challenging the regime. For him, when the coverage focuses only on treaties, negotiations, and military reactions, the main victim disappears, the ordinary Iranian people who face fear every day. In his speech, Pahlavi also rejected the idea that Iranians are not ready for democracy. For him, this argument is offensive and serves only to justify the maintenance of the regime. A people who face gunfire, imprisonment, censorship, internet blackouts, violence, and the risk of execution to demand freedom have already demonstrated political maturity. The question, according to the opposition, is not whether the Iranian people are ready. The question is whether the free world is ready to stop treating the oppressors as acceptable partners. The regime, in turn, tries to survive on three fronts. On the first, it represses inside Iran with arrests, threats, executions, and control of information. On the second, it tries to intimidate abroad, using allies, regional pressure, and threats against the interests of other nations. On the third, it keeps up its unity propaganda, saying that there is no division between moderates and radicals, only a united revolutionary nation. But this narrative seems increasingly forced when compared to signs of economic crisis, isolation, and internal disputes. The Revolutionary Guard is at the center of all this. It appears as a shield for the Ayatollahs and as a central target of the opposition. If this structure is isolated financially, politically, and symbolically, the regime loses its main instrument of control. That's why Pahlavi considers the European stance to be decisive. In his view, defending, softening, or delaying measures against the Revolutionary Guard is not neutrality. It's an indirect way of keeping the machine running. The final message is simple but weighty. Reza Pahlavi declared war on the European stance and on everyone who defends the bloody guard, and calls for the Iranian revolution because he sees a regime that is pressured, divided, and vulnerable. This is the moment when Europe needs to decide whether it will stand with the Iranian people or continue to be marked by its delay in the face of the brutal machine of repression and torture that keeps the regime in Tehran afloat. Like this video, subscribe, and check the comments at the end to engage more with the Milson Alves news community.